Welcome to the Reach College Podcast with your speaker, Pastor Taylor Gabbert.
Are you finding joy in your purpose? This is what the world looks at and sees as sovereignty, but that's not how God is sovereign. So if you have nephews or nieces, young kids in your life, family, or you're just close with family friends that have young kids, one of the things you'll notice about young children is that they want to participate. They want to do whatever dad's doing. They want to do whatever mom's doing. If you're an older cousin, an uncle, an aunt, every time you're around, the kid wants to participate. They want to mimic you. They want to see what you're up to. Well, one of the things that you've probably seen in your life, you ever seen when somebody is, maybe you're playing some Mario Kart, right? And the kid walks up and they want to play. But they're like way too young to participate in any kind of meaningful way in this game, right? So what do? You give them an unplugged controller and they sit there and they're like, yeah. But they're not doing anything, right? They're not actually playing the game. They just think they are, right? And it's a great way for them to participate. They get to spend time with you. They get to enjoy your presence. They're mimicking you, right? There's a lot of good things in that moment. What if that kid afterwards, like you finish the level, maybe get a high score or something, and the kid's like, yeah, that's how good I am at that game. Starts walking around like telling everybody like, you guys see me just beat that Mario Kart level? I crushed it. Like, I am the best at that game. And then just like taking it out on his little brother, just wailing on him like, you can't beat Mario Kart like I can, like I'm better than you, right? That wouldn't make any sense. And what would you do, right? Like, if you want to fix that situation, you'd be like, all right, well, let's play again. You plug in that controller. And you click Rainbow Road, and you watch him fall off the map just constantly. And you're like, you're not as good at this game as you thought you were, right? Because that would be absurd, right? The kid wants to participate. They want to spend time with you, but they don't have this attitude about it afterwards. They don't just walk off like, I'm the greatest at this ever, right? And it wouldn't be that hard to show them that that was a mistake. The thing is, like, we do this in our lives all the time. God invites us to participate with Him, to spend time with Him while He does what He's doing, to get to enjoy His presence and enjoy His activities. But then we walk off and we're like, do you see how great I am at this? Do you see how much I'm crushing life? And sometimes God's like, all right, let's plug in the controller. I'm going to let you run things for a second. And what always happens? We crash and burn, right? It's miserable. We're in a series on the book of Judges, and one of the things we're talking about, this theme that goes through the entire book of Judges, is that we should have a king. Like, we should have a ruler, an authority, something that's very un-American, right? We're all an individual, we elect our leaders, and then we tell them that they can't tell us what to do even though we elected them, right? But the reality is we should have a king, and the book of Judges is showing what happens when everybody acts like there's no king. What everybody does when nobody is the authority anymore. And it has the desired effect, because what you see in the book of Judges, what happens when we get into Samuel? They are begging for a king. But here's the thing, they've missed the point. And what we're going to see today, what we saw at the end of Gideon's life, what we're going to see today as we get into Abimelech, is they've already missed the point. They're already asking for the wrong person to rule over them, to be their king, instead of looking for the righteous king. So last week we talked about Gideon, and Gideon was the pretend king. He was the most ruler-like judge. He didn't want to be responsible, but he wanted to demand all the things that a king gets. And he treated people, in effect, like he was a king. Now we're going to get into Abimelech, his son, who is, in essence, going to be a full-fledged king. But he's going to be a full-fledged king in exactly the way the world thinks about a king. in exactly the way the world establishes authority. What he's not going to be is he's not going to be like the righteous king, like God as king. And what I want you to notice is as we have gone through the book of Judges, the threat has really downgraded, right? What's the first threat with Othniel? It is a superpower nation from far away. Then it's the next door neighbors that they kind of make fun of. Then it's the Canaanites that they didn't let out of the land, or they didn't get out of the land. And now we're finally so far in that the threat to Israel is an Israelite. That's how bad things have gotten. It's an internal problem now. Abimelech is half Canaanite, but he is a son of an Israelite father, right? So his heritage should be there. So we've had this cycle, this progress, or this progression in the story of Judges that's been breaking down. And what we're going to see now is in chapter 9, it's completely broken down. This is the slowest pace the author's going to go in the book of Judges. We're going to creep through. I mean, there's 57 verses in this one chapter talking about this one story because he is trudging through this. Why? He wants you to look at all of the decisions that every character in this story is going to make. All of these people, he's zooming so far in that you can't look at the decisions these people are making and think, oh, God's just animating these people, like forcing them to do what they're doing. And yet, as we zoom in all the way to individual decisions and we see each person acting in excruciating detail, God is sovereign. God's in charge. God never loses control. He's coordinating everything. This is your life. You are a participant. You're responsible for your actions. You are the one making the decisions of how you walk through your day. And yet, God is sovereign. God is in total control. God is coordinating the events of your life and everybody around you for what? For His glory. For His worship, to point to Him. That's what's happening. And that is what's going to happen in this story. This story also is going to show us the full-fledged Canaanization of Israel. They've progressed to the point, listen, as we read this, I just want you to have in the back of your head Game of Thrones, because that is this chapter of the Bible. It is just backstabbing and scheming and treachery and just everything that the world thinks of when they think, how do you get power? How do you get to be the sovereign, right? And the other thing we see is that God is going to be barely present in this story. Not only that, but He's only going to be referred to by the name Elohim. Why? Because Yahweh was God's personal name, and it meant the God of covenant. It described a God that was Israel's God, right? What we're going to see in this story is the one true God, Elohim, the God of all creation, that does not have a personal relationship with any of the actors. He's not, in their minds, their God. He's removed from the story, and yet He is the one causing all things and controlling all things. He's present the entire time. So we're going to see that Abimelech thinks that he is sovereign, but God is going to show us in this chapter who truly is sovereign in this story. So the first thing we're going to see is sovereignty declared. Look with me at verse 1 of chapter 9. Now Abimelech, the son of Jerubbaal, went to Shechem, to his mother's relatives, and spoke to them, and to the entire family of the household of his mother's father, saying, Speak now in the hearing of all the leaders of Shechem, which is better for you? For 70 men, all the sons of Jerubbaal, to rule over you, or for one man to rule over you? Also remember that I am your bone and your flesh. So his mother's relatives spoke all these words on his behalf in the hearing of all the leaders of Shechem. And they were inclined to follow Abimelech, for they said, He is our relative. And they gave him 70 pieces of silver from the house of Baal-berith, with which Abimelech hired worthless and reckless men, and they followed him. Then he went to his father's house in Ophrah and killed his brothers, the sons of Jerubbaal, 70 men on one stone. But Jotham, the youngest son of Jerubbaal, was left, because he hid himself. All the leaders of Shechem and all Beth Millo assembled together, and they went and made Abimelech king by the oak of the memorial stone, which was in Shechem. Okay. This is Abimelech's grasp at sovereignty, right? He is reaching out. He's orchestrating his sovereignty, declaring it, and then reaching out and taking it. This is his attempt to become sovereign. So he sets up a meeting with his mom's side of the family. This is important. In ancient culture, rule descended through the father. So his only claim to anything is because he's a relative through his mother's side to the Canaanites. But he doesn't have legitimate power because it has not come to him through his father, right? And then they give him 70 pieces of silver for the 70 brothers that he goes and kills. He hires reckless and worthless men with no conviction, men who will do something for money, right? Not men who are doing something that they believe in, not men who are loyal to him because of who he is, because of he's a descendant of somebody that's important, just because he paid them. And then I want you to see this. We like to picture this scene as kind of like they ambush his brothers and they slaughter them and it's a fight and people are trying to run. I want you to notice it says that he killed them on one stone. He oversaw the execution of every single one of his brothers one at a time. This is a brutal murder scene. Imagine that after just a game of Mario Kart. It's a terrifying moment, right? He is literally having his brothers brought up to this stone one at a time and brutally killed. And he's not even flinching, right? He's the one orchestrating this, causing this to happen. This is a wicked, wicked man. And then you can see that the elements, if we're seeing the Canaanization of Israel, the elements of his coronation, if you will, or his crowning ceremony, they're pagan. This isn't the way that God sets up for a king to be anointed and brought into power. This is what the Canaanites would have done. This is a pagan ceremony. So everything about this screams that it's not of God. Look at verse 7. Now when they told Jotham, he went and stood on top of the Mount Gerizim and raised his voice and called out. And he said to them, "Listen to me, you leaders of Shechem, that God may listen to you." Once the trees went to anoint a king over them, and they said to the olive tree, "Reign over us." But the olive tree said to them, "Shall I give up my fatness with which God and mankind are honored and go wave over the trees?" Then the tree said to the fig tree, "You, come reign over us." But the fig tree said to them, "Shall I give up my sweetness and my good fruit and go wave over the trees?" Then the trees said to the vine, "You come reign over us." But the vine said to them, "Shall I give up my new wine, which cheers God and mankind, and go wave over the trees?" Then all the trees said to the bramble, "You come reign over us." And the bramble said to the trees, If you really are anointing me as the king over you, come and take refuge in my shade. But if not, may fire come out of the bramble and consume the cedars of Lebanon. Okay. Jotham is the youngest brother, the least of his brothers, right? He has escaped, he's hidden himself, and he gets to a position where he can kind of call out, and he's going to use a fable. He's going to use a description. Fables often used animals or plants, nature, to tell some kind of moral story. And he's going to say, "Listen to my advice." Now, this is general wisdom. He says, "Listen to my advice so God may listen to you." Essentially, the statement is, there's a way the world works. God has orchestrated the world to unfold according to certain rights and wrongs. And then he's going to teach them he's going to teach them through a fable a general right. And he's going to say, there's a way that we treat people. There's a way that we work through things. And if you've done that wrong, I'm telling you it's not going to work out. I'm telling you that it's going to come to a bad end. And so he tells this story about the trees looking for a king. The first tree they approach is the olive tree. The olive tree, it says, should I give up my oil? Right? The olive tree produced oil, actually the same oil that they used to anoint kings. Right? And what he's saying is, should I be self-centered and be anointed with my own oil? Should I give up my purpose that brings joy in its usefulness? Right? He knows that he has a purpose. He doesn't want to go just rule. He wants to do what he was designed to do. Right? Then they go to the fig tree, and the fig tree says the same thing. He says, I'm a sweet tree. I'm refreshing. I bring something nutritious and good to people. Should I give that up just to go rule? To go try to take this position? What they're acknowledging is, I wasn't designed to rule. I was designed to do this thing. I have a purpose, and it's a good purpose. It's a purpose that pleases God. And then they go to the vine, and the vine says, I bring cheer and joy, not just to man, but to God. I please people. I have a purpose. I have a goal that has been given to me in my very nature. Right? And then they go to the bramble. The bramble's just a thorn bush. They go to the bramble. He's worthless. He has no purpose and no use. He is insecure in himself and insecure in his worth. He's essentially worthless. And he is the one that says, okay, I'll do it. I'll take this position. He is the one that accepts being anointed as king. He's excited about it. That's a promotion. He's going from worthless to all of a sudden he's in charge. You notice how every other tree understood that they had a purpose, and that purpose was more beautiful and more pure and more pleasing to God? They didn't want to give up their purpose. See, God is the king. He's the king. He's the only one designed to be the king. You're not supposed to be the king. You're not supposed to be the king in your life or anybody else's. God is the king. Are you finding joy in your purpose? Let God be sovereign, and you find the thing He has for you that pleases Him, that He's designed you to do, to serve Him. Don't let your desire be to be the king or to be in rebellion to the king. That comes from an insecurity, a lack of understanding your true purpose to worship God. And the bramble demonstrates what being king looks like to the world. He says, anoint me, honor me, put me in this position. He says, make me king, supreme. And he says, over you. Over you. We're called to serve others. We're called to love other people. The bramble is saying, I'm willing to be in charge, to be the one that calls the shots. Notice that he says, if you're really doing this, he's too insecure to even trust his new subjects. He says, take refuge, right? Notice this. Two statements. Take refuge. Brambles can't give shade. He's offering something he doesn't even have. He is promoting himself to a certain use that he is not created for. He's saying, take refuge under me. And he says, and if you don't, notice it says, fire will come out from the bramble. He's saying, I'm the one that will punish you. Put me in charge, take refuge under me, and if you don't, I am powerful enough that fire will come out of me and consume you. This is what leadership, this is what being a king looks like to the world. Being in charge, calling the shots, being the sovereign. But he doesn't have the ability to do either of these things. Look in verse 16. Now then, if you have acted with honesty and integrity in making Abimelech king, and if you have dealt with Jerubbaal and his house, and have dealt with him as he deserved, for my father fought for you and risked his life and saved you from the hand of Midian. But in fact, you have risen against my father's house today and have killed his sons, 70 men on one stone, and have made Abimelech, the son of his female slave, king over the leaders of Shechem, because he is your relative. So if you have acted with honesty and integrity towards Jerubbaal and his house this day, be joyful about Abimelech, and may he also be joyful about you. But if not, may fire come out of Abimelech and consume the leaders of Shechem and Beth Millo, and may fire come out of the leaders of Shechem and from Beth Millo and consume Abimelech. Then Jotham escaped and fled and went to Beer, and he stayed there because of his brother Abimelech. He says, have you acted honestly towards. The word here, he's saying, have you had total fidelity? Now this is interesting. He's actually saying this in two ways. He says, did you have total fidelity to Abimelech when you made this decision? Were you being genuine? Is he really going to be your king? Is he really your authority? Or was he just the most convenient option in the moment? Do you have a half heart to follow him? Are you going to take joy in him as your king? Or was this not true integrity and honesty and fidelity towards him? And then the other way he's saying this is, did you treat Gideon, my father, with true fidelity? Did you do what you said you would do for him and his house? Because he actually served you. He actually saved you. Gideon fought and rid the land of the Midianites who were consuming the land and oppressing everybody. And he's saying, you repaid that with a total lack of faith. Do you have any more faith for Abimelech? Do you have any more fidelity for Abimelech? Or are you half-hearted in this? Are you lying? He says, if this is a worthless relationship, it will be consumed in fire. Right? This is a general truth. I don't think that Jotham here knows that he's speaking for God in this moment. But what he's saying is a relationship born out of violence, it's going to end in violence. A relationship born out of betrayal and faithlessness, it's going to end that way. Right? And now, the beautiful thing is, Jotham, the least of these, he is the one that is proclaiming God's sovereignty in this moment. He's saying, you're not in charge. You can't make this work. If you're in sin here, it's going to end in sin. Abimelech set up his own sovereignty. He had to hire treacherous and worthless men, reckless men to follow him. Does God have to hire out ruffians to enforce what he needs done? No, because God is truly sovereign. So God is truly sovereign. Abimelech in this moment is feigning sovereignty. He's manipulating sovereignty. Abimelech was born of a female slave. He is least of all. He's even lesser than Jotham, the youngest brother that's full blood. Right? He is born of a female slave, and he thinks the most of himself. Now I want you to think about Jesus for a second. Jesus, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. God himself made flesh. How does he show up? As a baby in a barn? Lives a life of a carpenter, a servant, and then he's hung up on a cross to die. The ultimate picture of humility and service. Why did Christ die? For his subjects. He was a king that sacrificed himself for his people, and we're looking at Abimelech, who is ruthlessly murdering everybody to get them out of the way so he can be in charge. You see the difference here? This is what the world looks at and sees as sovereignty, but that's not how God is sovereign. God is so well seated in his control that he is doing things for our benefit, for us. Wrongly grasped sovereignty must be defended. Right? What do? That kid's flying off the handle about winning at Mario Kart. You plug in the controller, right? You're going to show him just how bad he is at this level, right? At this game. What we're going to see next is sovereignty challenged, sovereignty tested. We're going to see the controller get plugged in. We're going to let Abimelech lead for a second. Abimelech is going to have to scramble for control, but I want you to notice this. While Abimelech is scrambling for control, God is peacefully seated on his throne, being completely sovereign. He is orchestrating all these events perfectly. Look at verse 22. Now Abimelech ruled over Israel for 3 years. Then God sent an evil spirit between Abimelech and the leaders of Shechem. And the leaders of Shechem dealt treacherously with Abimelech, so that the violence done to the 70 sons of Jerubbaal would come, and the responsibility for their blood would be placed on their brother Abimelech, who killed them, and on the leaders of Shechem, who encouraged him to kill his brothers. The leaders of Shechem set up men in ambush against him on tops of the mountains, and they robbed everyone who would pass by them on the road, and it was reported to Abimelech. So Gaal, the son of Ebed, came to his relatives and crossed over into Shechem. And the leaders of Shechem trusted him. So they went out to the field and gathered the grapes of their vineyards and trampled them and held a festival. And they went into the house of their God and ate and drank and cursed Abimelech. Then Gaal, the son of Ebed, said, Who is Abimelech, and who is Shechem, that we should serve him? Is it not the son of Jerubbaal, and is Zebul not his governor? Serve the men of Hamor, your father of Shechem, but why should you serve him? If only this people were under my authority, then I would do away with Abimelech. And he said to Abimelech, Enlarge your army and come out. All right, so it says that God sent an evil spirit. Okay, I want to zone in on this for a second, because this is a story about God's sovereignty, about God being in control. And the problem is, the way that we view God is that he's in control, and he's also like vindictive and cruel. He sent this evil spirit. He sent this bad thing, right? Okay, let's talk about this for a second. First of all, who's he sending this to? Not like great people, right? So we have this view that like God's just up there just pulling puppet strings and being mean to people. These are evil men. These are worthless, reckless, and evil men. And secondly, the phrase is misunderstood for us. It's not the spirit was evil, right? It's that the effect the spirit had was evil, in that it caused friction. It caused evil outcome, right? Here's the thing. If you're in rebellion to God, his spirit will cause you to be in more rebellion. You don't want to be around God's spirit when you're not of his spirit. So God's sending something to them, and even so, we can honestly be too specific with this. It could be as simple as saying, God let the consequences of their actions start coming about. They're evil men with evil spirits, and their evil spirits started to grind between them and cause friction, cause problems. But it's written this way so that you may know that God was still sovereign. God was still overseeing this event. This didn't just happen. It's not like God's up in heaven just like, man, I hope this works out poorly for them. He's not a bystander, right? So whether he enacted it, or whether he caused it, or whether he just let the natural course of their sin take hold, he's in charge. He's doing this, and it says in the very next part, it says he did this so that the blood of all Gideon's sons that they spilt would be back on them. Why? Because God would be glorified in the justice that's about to be done. And a whole bunch of evil people are the ones that are about to die for this. A whole bunch of bad people are going to go away because of this. So God's purpose is stated that they would pay, that God would be seen as sovereign. And then it says that the men of Shechem were robbing. Basically, they're causing turmoil. They're going rogue. They're not doing what Abimelech wants, and he knows it. What are we seeing there? Not as sovereign as he thinks he is. He can't stop this from happening. It's been reported to him, and he's probably in his throne room going, how do I deal with this? How do I fix this problem? Because he's not all powerful. He can't just snap his fingers and make something go away. And then we get this guy, Gaal, is a full-blood Canaanite. His father is a Canaanite. And his mother probably wasn't a Canaanite slave. Right? This guy has more claim than Abimelech. This guy has more right to rule in Shechem than he does. And he immediately is a big talker. He's immediately coming in, and what is he doing? He's back in phase 1. He's declaring his sovereignty. He's saying, hey, if I was in charge, we wouldn't have to deal with any of this. If I was in charge, I would have this under control, and you could serve somebody who is at least of your people, not some half-breed. Right? So then, look in verse 30. When Zebul, the leader of the city, heard the words of Gaal, the son of Ebed, his anger burned. So using deception, he successfully sent messengers to Abimelech, saying, Behold, Gaal, the son of Ebed, and his relatives have come to Shechem, and behold, they are stirring up the city against you. So now arise by night, you and the people who are with you, and lie in wait in the field. Then in the morning, as soon as the sun is up, you shall rise early and attack the city, and behold, When he and the people who are with him come out against you, you shall do to them whatever you can. So Abimelech and all the people who were with him got up at night and lay in wait against Shechem in 4 units. Now Gaal, the son of Ebed, went out and stood in the entrance of the city gate, and Abimelech and the people who were with him arose from the ambush. When Gaal saw the people, he said to Zebul, "Look, people are coming down from the tops of the mountains." But Zebul said to him, "You are seeing the shadow of the mountains as if it were people." And Gaal spoke yet again and said, "Look, people are coming down from the highest part of the land, and 1 unit is coming by way of the diviner's oak." Then Zebul said to him, "Where then is your boasting, with which you said, 'Who is Abimelech that we should serve him?' Is this not the people whom you rejected? Go now and fight them." So Gaal went out in the sight of the leaders of Shechem and fought Abimelech, but Abimelech chased him, and he fled from him, and many fell wounded up to the entrance of the gate. Then Abimelech stayed in Arumah, but Zebul drove out Gaal and his relatives, so they could not stay in Shechem. So this is where things get really Game of Thrones, right? We see that he sent people by deception, right? He sent like spy messengers. We've got a plan. They're going to ambush him. They've got a time. They're going to draw him out. What are they doing? They're grasping at control. They're trying to manipulate their situation. Like this is like, point in case, this is like us all the time. Every day you wake up, if you don't spend the first part of your day acknowledging that God is responsible and sovereign for everything in your life, and you're awake for the purpose of His glory, you're just walking out the door trying to control everything. Why do you think you get road rage? You don't have control over every last instance of your life, but you like to pretend you do. And these people right now, they're causing all this. And then what happens? The ambush starts. You can think it's probably dawn time frame. Maybe there's a little morning mist or fog. And he looks up and he sees the shadows of people moving, which in a quantity that wouldn't have been normal, right? And he goes, "Do you see that? There's people coming down." And Zebul, who knows exactly what's going on, he's like, "No, you crazy. There's nothing out there." Right? Because again, we're trying to manipulate this situation. We're trying to control. He says, "I don't see anything. You just rub the sleep out of your eyes. Go back to bed even," right? And then he keeps looking and he sees it for sure. He's like, "I think we're under attack here. I think there's a problem." And that's when Zebul switches it on him and he says, "Yeah, where's your boasting now? Plugged your controller in. It's not going to work very well for you. What are you going to do about it? You talked a big game last night when we were all drinking at the bars, but can you actually control this? Can you actually go out and fight this fight?" And what happens? He goes out, he tries to engage, and he gets destroyed. He gets beat. Right? So, what is happening here? God is still being sovereign. An evil man, a Canaanite, is being defeated. Right? Nothing that's happening right now is not glorifying and honoring God, even though it's by the hand of Abimelech. Look at verse 42. "Now it came about the next day that the people went out to the field, and it was reported to Abimelech. So he took his people and divided them into 3 units and lay in wait in the field. When he looked and saw the people coming out from the city, he attacked them and killed them. Then Abimelech and the company who was with him rushed forward and stood at the entrance of the city gate. And 2 other companies then attacked all who were in the field and killed them. Abimelech fought against the city that whole day, and he captured the city and killed the people who were in it. Then he tore down the city and sowed it with salt." So he's slaughtering tons of people. Like, keep in mind, these are technically supposed to be his subjects, right? And he's just on a rampage. He's killing everybody that so much as looks at him wrong, right? This is showing us how Canaanite the land is. This is a Canaanite story, like, pulled straight from their books. If you were to pull up a Canaanite history book, you would find backstabbing and treachery. You'd find pagan ceremonies. You'd find murders of innocent people. You'd find executions. You'd find grasping for control in all aspects of life. This is as Canaanite as it gets. Nothing about this screams people of God doing God's work. This is just, again, you could go watch an episode of Game of Thrones and just be like, "Yep, I see it. That's definitely right here in the Bible. It's as simple as what normally occurs in life. My question for you is this: what parts of your life are you frantically trying to gain control over? What parts of your life do you think you're sovereign over? You think you're going to manipulate and figure out? Is it relationships? Is it bills? Is it school? Is it your sin? You know, there's no amount of sin that you can regulate. You can't just look at pornography a little bit. You can't just get drunk a little bit. Like, whatever you're trying to regulate and control in your life, it's going to run away with you. It's going to create chaos and treachery. It's going to try to kill you and take your life. Is your life, is grasping at controlling your life not working? Because you have the wrong king. If you're king, or if something else in your life is king, it's not going to work out. You need one king, the righteous king. You either are the bramble or you're serving the bramble, but it's not working out. Are you looking to the right king? We've seen that now that the sovereignty of Abimelech has been challenged. It's been tested. And it's not working out very well for him. I mean, he's having to scramble. God's sovereignty, by the way, is working out perfectly. God's sovereignty hasn't even begun to be challenged. Everything that's happening is exactly what He has wanted to happen. And in the next portion, we're going to see that His sovereignty gets proven. See, God's sovereignty will always be proven. Here's the reality. If you manage to go your entire life without realizing that God is sovereign, you will be shown at the very end. You will see God's sovereignty. There will be no way to miss it. But you can see God's sovereignty all around you right now. You can participate in it. You can take joy in it. But if you're His enemy, even if you manage to deny and pretend that His sovereignty isn't real, eventually you're going to find out. And at that point, it's going to be too late. Look at verse 46. When all the leaders of the Tower of Shechem heard about it, they entered the inner chamber of the temple of El-Berith. And it was reported to Abimelech that all the leaders of the Tower of Shechem were gathered together. So Abimelech went up to Mount Zalmon, he and all the people who were with him, and Abimelech took an axe in his hand and cut down the branch from the trees. And he lifted it and put it on his shoulder. Then he said to the people who were with him, What you saw me do, hurry and do likewise. So all the people also cut down each one his branch and followed Abimelech, and put them on top of the inner chamber, and set the inner chamber on fire over those inside. So that all the people in the Tower of Shechem also died, about 1,000 men and women. What just happened? God used a wicked man to kill his enemies, to bring about His sovereignty, to prove that He's in charge. Here's the thing. We trip up over this thing about God sending an evil spirit. Here's the reality. God is so sovereign. God is so big. He can use the evil spirits. He can use the evil men. He chooses to use us when we're faithful, when we love Him. But God can use anything. His sovereignty is not at the whim only of having people who are loyal to Him. His sovereignty is proven even in the people who are the most rebellious to Him. God's sovereignty is coming through Abimelech right now, the fake sovereign. And then what you see here is that when we saw Gideon, when Gideon's last fight happened, what did he do? He mimicked everything that God had told him to do the first time. He attacked at night. He caused a scare and chaos. He only attacked with the 300 men. He mimicked God's victory, but he did it for himself. Well, here's the thing. What we're about to see is Abimelech. He's going to mimic this first victory, right? He just took the city. and he burned down the tower. He's on a roll. He's proven his sovereignty. So now look at verse 50, and let's watch him repeat exactly what he just did. Then Abimelech went to Thebez, and he camped against Thebez and captured it. But there was a strong tower in the center of the city, and all the men and women with all the leaders of the city fled there and shut themselves in. And they went up on the roof of the tower. So Abimelech came to the tower and fought against it and approached the entrance of the tower to burn it down with fire. But a woman threw an upper millstone on Abimelech's head, crushing his skull. Then he called quickly to a young man, his armor-bearer, and said to him, "Draw your sword and kill me, so that it will not be said of me, 'A woman killed him.' So the young man pierced him through, and he died." Okay, pay attention. Where was his claim to power? It was through his mother. It was through a woman. It wasn't through the legitimacy of descending through the father. His power came from a woman. That would have been an illegitimate claim in ancient times. And now he meets his end at the hand of a woman. God has capped his life in what would have been the most embarrassing reality for him. He wasn't a great Canaanite warrior. He wasn't a noble fighter, warrior, general. He was the son of a slave woman killed by a woman. None of this looks good for him. And even up to the last second, he is so prideful that instead of in his dying moments being like, "My whole life has been a waste," he goes, "You kill me so they can't say a woman killed me." And what did we do? We recorded it that a woman killed him. He's not even sovereign even unto his last dying act. He can't accomplish anything. He's the useless bramble that wants to rule. Do you know where any authority you have on this earth comes from? It comes from your heavenly Father who holds all authority. By the way, that's the only way to hold any authority in this life and not abuse it. To understand that it comes from the Father, that it's directly given to you as a blessing for you to bless others with, not as something for you to abuse. Abimelech didn't realize that any authority he had was from the king. Are you the useless bramble trying to rule your own life? Look in verse 55. Now when the men of Israel saw that Abimelech was dead, each left for his home. So God repaid the wickedness of Abimelech, which he had done to his father, in killing his 70 brothers. God also returned all the wickedness of the men of Shechem on their heads, and the curse of Jotham, the son of Jerubbaal, came upon them. Okay, what happens? What did we see? When Gideon died, everyone just quit caring that Gideon had ever lived. They had no real loyalty to him, no total fidelity. Well, what happens here? As soon as Abimelech dies, you can almost see people mid-battle. They're like, "Oh, he's dead? All right, well, I'm going home." No one cares. No one had any real loyalty to him. He hired reckless and worthless men. Are you surrounding yourself in your life with things that have no loyalty to you? That do not care if you live or die? Because as soon as they manage to get you killed, they're going to go on doing their own thing. That's like all sin, by the way. All of your sin in any aspect of your life, it doesn't care about you. It doesn't care if you live or die. And the momentary pleasure it gives you isn't from loyalty. It's leading you to death. And as soon as you die, it'll keep on chugging. It's going to move on to the next person. Are you surrounding yourself in your life with false things? We hear this story about, we've all experienced the kid that's playing with the unplugged controller. And when you hear that story and you think, then that kid gets up and starts walking around like he's all of a sudden the biggest, baddest video game player ever, that doesn't even make sense. No kid does that. That's a silly story. Exactly. So stop living that out. Stop walking around in your life just acting like you've got this all under control, like you're the biggest, baddest person at whatever you're trying to do. God is sovereign. Serve Him, glorify Him, fulfill your God-given purpose that, by the way, is your God-given purpose because it brings glory to God, not because it brings glory to you. God's sovereignty is proven at the same moment that Abimelech's sovereignty falls all the way through. The whole point of Judges is that you need a king. You need the sovereign, righteous, holy king, the king above all kings. God's sovereignty is declared. You know, it's declared in this entire book. From cover to cover, God's sovereignty is declared. Where does this book start? That God creates everything. Again, I've said this before, but have you ever built a Lego set and then felt like that Lego set was going to win a fight with you? Like, God is the creator. You don't have a leg to stand on. You can't overthrow him. You can't fight back against him. He's not threatened by you. His sovereignty was declared on the first pages of this book, and guess where it ends? And his sovereignty is proven in the last pages of this book. It's cover to cover how he's in control. That's the whole thing. It's declared. God's sovereignty is declared. It's unchallenged. He is the victor, and he's not scrambling to figure out how to keep it. And it's proven. It's not just proven later, it's proven right now. You just have to open your eyes and look around and realize that he is sovereign. And the whole point of a message on God's sovereignty is this. If you have not submitted yourself in your life to his sovereignty to serve the master, you need to cry out for mercy. You need to cry out for his saving grace. You need to believe that he's not a king like Abimelech, but that he's a loving, gracious, good king that loves you and died for you. He's the king, but he's not a despot. He's not a vindictive dictator. He's benevolent and loving and caring, and he wants you to serve him. God's sovereignty doesn't excuse you from your sin. He's in control, and you will be held account for your rebellion to him. He wants you to choose him as king. This week, I want you to think about that. I want you to ask yourself, when you wake up in the morning, am I sovereign? Or is God sovereign? And you know, if God's sovereign, do you know what you should spend the first moments of your day doing? Pledging your allegiance to him. Spending time with him in his word. Showing him that you love him. Because he is sovereign.
Hey guys, this is Philip Jackson, pastor to young adults at Evergreen Baptist Church. I want to invite you to come to Reach. We meet every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. at Evergreen Church in South Tulsa, just east of Mingo on 111th Street. The mission of Reach Tulsa is to cultivate a young adult community that's defined by real transformation and the sincere pursuit of a godly life through training in biblical disciplines, personal development, and intentionally transitioning into independence as mature members of the body of Christ. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to like and subscribe to our content. We're available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Reach Young Adult Ministry is a part of Evergreen Baptist Church in Tulsa, Oklahoma. For more information and additional lessons, please visit our website, evergreenbc.org.